So we're joined by three new faces. Zeev, I met you briefly over coffee. Jonathan, and Katja. Would you mind introducing yourself briefly or not so briefly, whatever you want? Who are you?
So first, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for being able to present to you PRIZOD. I will explain a little bit more about it in a few minutes. My name is Zeev Noga. I'm a veterinarian working in the field of veterinary policies and One Health policies at both European and international level in the past 15, 16 years. I'm very much looking forward for these panel discussions and also to present to you PRIZOD and what we are doing at the global level trying to prevent the next pandemic through the prevention of zoonotic disease emergence.
Katja, would you mind doing the same thing, but then differently?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Katja Neubauer. I'm a commission official. I'm a senior commission official, so I've spent quite some years at the commission. I've worked for many years in DG Santé on health policy on a whole variety of subjects. And now I moved 3 years ago, actually 3.5 years ago by now, to DG RTD, where I am mainly in charge of the pandemic preparedness partnership. And that puts me in this podium discussion of today in a very comfortable position because the partnership has already been presented by Hervé. So I don't need to say much in terms of introduction. I think that you have listened to the excellent presentation by Hervé, who is charged with the development of the proposal for the partnership and of the strategic research and innovation agenda. And that is what I am following from the Commission side. Thank you.
Jonathan, we've heard from you. We've heard a couple of questions from you throughout the course of the day. Now I would like to know who you are, please.
So, Jonathan Ewbank. I was for more than 2 decades running a fundamental research lab in an immunology institute in the south of France. And 2 years ago, actually took over from Hervé at ARENHA. So this was rather a career shift for me, but I'm very pleased to have done it because ARENHA is very actively contributing to pandemic preparedness, as I'll explain when we talk a little bit more about our activities.
Okay, well, again, thank you very much for joining us, for joining us on stage. Just so you know who you're dealing with here, I am an editor. I work for a chair, a business school chair in France. We work together with UNESCO. We do foresight, we do innovation, we do medicine, we do artificial intelligence. And in the small team in which I work, I'm the one who gets to ask really serendipitous questions. So my strategy is to do exactly the same thing right now, if I may. So as a writer, we really like paradoxes. On the one hand, what I said earlier, to welcome everyone back for the second part of the afternoon, we tend to take our health for granted when we're healthy. And at the same time, here we are talking about pandemics. How do we harmonize both for the sake of humanity? Ta-da!
I think there are some aspects that you can draw some parallels. So, just on a budgetary level, Belgium spends 0.2% of its GDP on fire prevention. Okay, so that translates to 1 billion euros a year for fire prevention. But most of us aren't too concerned because we believe that we're protected. And indeed, most of us throughout our lives, we will not see a major fire. And yet, there is this reticence to embark on sufficient investment to ensure that we're not going to be faced with another serious pandemic. So I think there is, yes, this paradox that in aspects of our life we deal with, but as far as infectious diseases, we still haven't integrated that it's a necessary step.
Does anyone want to comment about that? It's that kind of a thing. You just snatch a microphone from whoever's sitting next to you, or not. And the same applies to you. If you want to ask a question, do something. Make yourself noticeable.
Yes, thank you. Maybe I can kind of come into this question from looking at the political priorities, right? Because as I mentioned before, I've been working for a very long time in the area of health policy, and within the EU, health policy has been important, but it has not been like the top of the agenda until COVID hit. That was really the wake-up call with health and of course the response and the preparation to a possible new pandemic like being really the political priority. Now we see, and I think this has been mentioned before, that this has changed. There's like a tendency to forget, right? The pandemic is something of the past. People are not really worried. And in a way, the question really is, how can we keep health, pandemic preparedness more specifically, on the political agenda? And that is, of course, something that in the Commission we are working on. And it's not only us, it's also a task for the member states. Events like the one that we are, organizing, that we are attending today do contribute. But I would say that all in all, maybe it's not a bad thing that the political attention has moved to, unfortunately, other crises, because we live in this world of a polycrisis, right? We have Russia's aggression war on the Ukraine, we have the climate change, so the political attention has maybe moved to other things that seem more pressing. But that gives us the possibility, on the one hand, to kind of think, what is it that we have set up in the crisis where we had to react very quickly? Did we get it right? So we have an opportunity to reassess and to evaluate what we have done, and I think that this is happening. And we also have an opportunity to continue to work and to prepare for the next pandemic, and to do that in a more, let's say, calm manner. And as you have seen by the presentation of Hervé, to prepare a partnership on pandemic preparedness, that's a very important element, but it takes time. So in a way, I think it's good that we have this opportunity where we can take a bit of a breath, and develop whatever we need to develop so that we are better prepared for the next pandemic.
Meanwhile, the public is talking about, I was listening to an interview last week about Ewbank, and they were talking about the pandemic in obesity and diabetes. There's even a narcissism pandemic going on, would you believe it? And then I think, are we losing grip of the severity of what this is really about? Is the word pandemic kind of losing its meaning because maybe we're not talking about it too much, or we're not talking about it in the right way?
Well, I believe you're right. If you look at the way we circulate with the train or the bus or the metro, nobody's wearing any mask at the present time. The virus is still circulating, and nobody goes back to vaccination at the present time. So that's a reality. But I believe that, by the way, this preparedness is very important in order to educate. I don't like this word, but to educate the population, to convince the population that it's still a reality, because there is something I'm quite sure the scientific population, as it is now, would we be very happy to propose some scientific research programs, but we need to have a political support and of course funds, but it comes later on. So that's very important. The other things, if I'm talking about the present scientific community, is because if you look at the cursus of many of the students, they are not moving anymore to our domains. For many reasons, it's no more attractive. The salaries are not the best. What has happened in terms of fake news also during the pandemic itself are probably impact their way to look at science. It is something that is possible. So this means that, by the way, we need also to develop programs in this field to keep everybody aware, and also to motivate the youngest people.
Yeah, the next question is going to you, because we had a good conversation during coffee about, you mentioned that everyone is more or less stuck in trauma. We're all traumatized. Am I using that against you now? Yes. So we're more or less traumatized by what happened to us. And if there's anything we've learned from people who are traumatized from PTSD, is that to go from here to moving, we need to start moving. Is that the focus of what you do together with your team?
So I would answer to your question, but I would like to touch a little bit on your last two questions. So when you said we need also to divide we. You have the public, the mass public, that they don't really care. They just want to live their life. They want to be sure they have they are safe, they have food on the table, their kids are okay, healthy, etc., etc. So they don't really think. So all we are here and all the people working in the different health sectors, it's our responsibility to actually to walk through this, to not forget about the pandemic, because most of the people move on. But we are still here because we are still, in a way, as I said before, traumatized, and we want to avoid the future one, the future pandemic. So we, the scientists, all the people that are working in the field of health, we are still very much engaged. And the public would like to believe and trust that we are doing the job to keep them safe. So this is the point when I mentioned before, traumatized. And yes, I think COVID is a wake-up call. Is each one of us, it touches us in different ways. Personally, if people we know died, her health were compromised, job loss, mental health, so many different issues. Even stay with the kids at home for so many months, it was quite heavy for everyone. So we want to make sure that we don't go back to this. So the health community, through the different sectors, doing their best in order to avoid and prevent the next pandemic.
Should this European strategy that we've been talking about all day also encompass psychological help? I mean, people are still suffering from the effects of the pandemic. How far should we go in our support? Yes, please.
Maybe to answer to your first question, I mean, I think that where we lost somehow trust of the public is because there was a lack of knowledge on the interventions that were necessary and the ones that were not. You know, there was a lot of confusion. Do masks protect, yes or no? Do we need social distances, yes or no? Do we need school closures, yes or no? So there was a lack of evidence on that. So the politicians didn't really have the evidence they needed to take the right decisions and to communicate them in the right way. And I think that this is super important, and it's something that also the partnership will be working on to gather this evidence. Now it's of course a big task because we don't know which epidemic or pandemic is going to hit next. And it will be quite challenging to be prepared in terms of non-pharmaceutical interventions, you know, to know or to have more evidence and more of a steer to say what is going to work and what is not going to work. But what you said on the mental health issues, I mean, that is of course a very, a very important point. There is evidence that the pandemic has resulted, I can maybe even say, into a mental health pandemic afterwards, in particular for children and young people. And this is something that is also being addressed at the European level, both in terms of health policy, so how to tackle this from the health systems point of view, but also in the research area to try to find the best interventions to address this, because indeed there is a big need.
If I'm listening to all of these initiatives, thank you for explaining them, it is almost like, with respect for all the effort, it's like building a structure to deal with our uncertainty on how to really move ahead, how to transform the research efforts that we need to be better prepared. And if I hear this, my worry is that the structure and the house will be very limiting and will be built on the basis of how we have been working rather than be the open creative space that is needed to really come up with new thinking, new solutions, etc. Where does that sit? And I can really understand the need for structure for instance, for the clinical trial systems and having something in place for the first few 100 cases, that kind of question, but where is the open thinking space for maybe ideas that are not mentioned in the current list of topics? Where is that? How do you see that?
I can start. No, but I think that it is very important to have sort of possibilities for scientists to come in with completely new ideas. And I think that the different partnerships will provide that opportunity. And I think maybe to a greater extent than national funding system, because the added advantage of pooling resources between different national funding systems and the European Commission is that you create a stronger competitiveness between scientific proposals that are submitted. So I think we have a better way maybe than to actually find these groundbreaking projects.
It may be part of me, I don't understand the full mechanism, but we've seen that with One Health EGP, where the subsequent assignment of projects was very much limited by political choices, because that were priorities, and that they came with, hey, we co-fund this, so we get to say at the political level what we prioritize. And that's my concern here, also for the Commission.
No, but there are different flavors of partnerships. One Health EGP was slightly different from the ones we are now talking about. These ones are more open in that respect.
I remember interviewing an oncologist last year who had an epiphany one moment. He was sitting in his laboratory and he said, all of a sudden I saw this image of myself studying cancer cells in a room, and that was it. And he said, this doesn't make any sense. So he became a holistic practitioner, MD, whatever. And he said, the hardest thing for me was to step out of my field of expertise, because I had to step out of my identity and I had to lose a part of my ego as well. So I'd like to ask a question about that regarding the next generation. But before I forget, we did prepare a bit of an interactive slot for you. So hopefully, yes, if I do this, we prepared, I think, 3 questions for you, for us to answer collectively. Does something happen when you scan that? Teach me what happens when you scan that. You get a question? You get a Mentimeter, that is good. And then you get a question? Okay, I'm counting on you guys to figure that out. Meanwhile, are you comfortable asking your question now? Yeah, can I sit next to you? Wait, let me look.
Might I just say something in response to what Marianne said as well, which is of course, although these are very important initiatives, they're not exclusive initiatives that are intended to cover the entire research area. As you know, we have Pillar 1, Pillar 2, Pillar 3. ERC funding will still be available for individuals who come up with innovative ideas to help tackle pandemic preparedness. Having said that, I also agree with you, and you're in a very good position to know about the fragmentation, because I believe that you are running within Durable, the HERA network, a work package that is intended to map the complexity of the landscape. And I believe this has been an extremely difficult task. And it's probably a full-time task. And to come back to something that was said earlier as well, there is absolutely there's no reward for initiatives to say, we shouldn't be doing this because we're duplicating somebody else's activity. And there's no incentive not to start something that is redundant. And that's something that certainly does need to be addressed.
Next question comes from here.
Yeah, thank you. I want to build on what Marion was saying in terms of like all the initiatives that you're all involved in, and it's all very important work, but where is the transformation going to come from? There are the ideas that we don't know where they will sit, but I'm also interested in the how are we going to do things differently? Not just have different ideas about maybe science, etc. But I mean, we come back, and sorry if I sound like a broken record, but equity or the lack thereof has been a major failure of our response. And I don't hear anything that actually addresses that in a transformational way. We're still talking about the same public-private partnerships, the same research institutes doing it in the same way, and I haven't heard where the transformation is going to come from. So it's a question to any of all of you, like what do you think is the most transformational in what is happening, or do you maybe think we don't need that transformation. A bit more of the same will be enough.
Okay, if I may, though, of course, that's a crucial question, but I could be a little bit provocative, but I do not agree with you, because I've been working on emerging infectious disease as others there for many years. Something has changed. We try to get money at peaceful time. Each time we had a crisis, there was some money available to perform research in not the right conditions. And 2 months later on, nothing, no calls for Ebola, for any hemorrhagic fever disease, for arboviruses, etc. Nothing. So it is changing. That's the first point. The second one concerning the scientific approach you can propose. I think, of course, most of these initiatives are more or less top-down initiatives. But afterwards, if we have joint or transnational calls that will be open, then it will go on the other sense. So the scientific community will have the opportunity to make some proposals. And where I see something that has changed during the last year is that we have pushed lots of big structured programs, because it was really needed to avoid to only have discoveries in scientific articles, but to be in position to push these discoveries in the flow of development. So, and for that, you need to develop transnational approach with lots of community, big consortia. It is crucial. But I agree with Marion. If the creativity is not there, so this means that we should have the right balance between risky programs that would cost lower money, but you know that among 100, maybe one will lead to something that will be in position to be developed, but anyway, one is one. So I think that's the way we shall proceed, and it's still not clear at the present time, I think, in many countries, and at the EU level also. Can we invest in something where in 10 years, my authority will say, okay, but you have funded thousands of projects, and there is only 2 results. But you're right.
I can add that I think the European Commission is actually challenging us funders now more than before. When we are applying for these partnerships, it's a very clear expectation that transformative activities should be included in the program I would say to a greater extent than before. In our previous projects, we did also include developmental aid agencies that allowed us to fund researchers directly in Africa, and that was a way, of course, to change the perspective of the goals of the different projects. So I would say we are trying, we are improving, but we are not there yet. Absolutely not.
Hi, I'm Barbara Kestens from DG Research and Innovation. Just to bounce back on what you were saying and your question on transformation, I think the 2 partnerships in the make that you've heard of today are already a way of transforming, because the AMR partnership has a stronger emphasis on One Health approach, and we realize in the development of that partnership how difficult it is to break silos and move beyond what the comfort zone is. The JPI-AMR is a very successful joint programming initiative with wide span, and now we want to go beyond, and that is the collective exercise that we're doing with the member states. The Pandemic Preparedness Partnership has different pillars, and one of them is also innovative in the sense that the development, the support for EU-wide clinical trial networks. So I would not be so negative in terms of opening space for doing things different, building on what there has been. Then again, there can be more innovation taking place, and like you were saying, Hervé, this is this question of risk-taking. That is part of the peer review process when you have call for proposals, where indeed the question is, should we allow for funding riskier proposals that might not deliver, but if they do deliver, it's a game changer. And this is the kind of discussions that are taking place and will take place in the future, also looking at the next framework program. So I think, I think that there is this push for change, going beyond what the comfort zone of everyone, And I must say we are very happy with the well, first of all, for the Belgian presidency to organize this event, but also for the fact that we are engaging in a continuous dialogue where no one has the solution ready-made, but where we're trying to say, okay, let's move forward with the best. Yep.
Just a very semantic point, and this is a pet peeve of mine when, Barbara, everybody uses the term silo, but implicitly that gives an excuse for not seeing what your neighbor's doing. We're actually in fish bowls that are interconnected. We can all see what everybody's doing. We have the possibility of moving from one space to another. It's just that there's no incentive, there's not sufficient incentive for that to happen. Anna was talking about an initiative now in the UK to try and get the social sciences truly integrated into the biological discussions as well. And that's the type of thing that needs to be encouraged. And those mechanisms perhaps are for the moment lacking.
Maybe I just would like to comment on that. And I'm actually representing the Durable Work Package that is combining the different, I couldn't call it silos anymore, but indeed the different expertises, and to see how by collaborating and exploring innovations that take place in different fields of expertise, how they can actually reach more and add value to each other's work, and how actually feedback loops emerge when people start to understand better what their neighbors are doing and how new opportunities are being put there more visible. Then I think the human behavior part is very important there as well, next to funding and how institutions have a legacy, how they have established their knowledge over the years. We cannot forget the history, but also very important, as we've seen it, as it's progressing right now, is the younger generation. So we actually created a program called Durable Young, in which we engage them to be part of mapping these connections between all the expertise levels and institutions. So that's been a very good experience so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Two questions. One is, what's the meaning of pan-European? Is it within the EU? I mean, it's a political definition of Europe, a geographic definition of Europe, which of course for pandemics is very relevant. And my second question is, this is about an initiative about preparedness of the research system. Is that a sort of isolated initiative of the research community within the Commission? Or is it part of a bigger, and sorry for my ignorance, preparedness plan of the European Commission that would involve, I don't know, social protection, economy, trade, because as we've been keeping saying today, pandemics are much more than just a health event. So, because if you build the clinical trial network and then someone decides to close borders, as it has happened, because of sovereignty, the whole thing will collapse. So how much is this coupled to a more ambitious multi-sectorial preparedness plan?
Is your question directed to?
Yes, so I think that's a question to the Commission, I guess, no? Maybe on the first question that you had, to ensure the pan-European preparedness, I mean, that what is meant exactly with pan-European, that is of course more of a question to the organizer who developed the question, but just to say that on the Partnership on Pandemic Preparedness, it is not limited to EU member states. It can clearly go beyond. And what we see is that there's a lot of interest also from non-EU member states. Even at the global level, there's a lot of interest to join the partnership. Now, to build the partnership is quite challenging, so it's good to start with the EU and to make it as inclusive as possible, also reaching out to a maximum number of member states, and then to say we're also going wider than that to other European countries or even to the global area. Now, you're right that we are mainly talking, when it comes to the initiatives that we are discussing today, about the preparedness of the research ecosystem. But it does go hand in hand with other initiatives and other political initiatives in the European Commission. So, for instance, in the area of health policy, there's a whole series of initiatives that have been taken in response to the COVID-19 crisis. So there's a whole European Health Union on health security and health preparedness that has been developed with legislation on serious cross-border health threats, with extended mandates for the EMA, for ECDC, with the setting up of HERA. We're going to hear more about HERA tomorrow. So it is truly, it's correct, a preparedness of the research ecosystem, but embedded in the wider political context. And we are, in our daily work, reaching out to the other departments and directorates generals of the Commission and make sure that we work hand in hand. Now, you rightly said that there are, of course, beyond the health, there are other aspects, like to keep the borders open, or the internal market working, etc. So also there are efforts in other political areas. I mean, it would go a little bit beyond the exercise of today to look into that. But I think that the response at the EU level to the COVID-19 crisis has really been a holistical one, in terms of, I would say, almost each and every policy being involved in reacting to the crisis, and also to a certain extent to be prepared for the next one.
Anyone else? If I may, I'd like to, there's another paradox. I find myself struggling a little bit. So artificial intelligence has been mentioned quite a few times in the role of foresight, for example, always with a lot of optimism as a force for good. Artificial intelligence will allow us to explore all the different scenarios that might or might not occur. On the other hand, artificial intelligence, especially in the realm of health, is almost being used to propel this idea that we can trick nature into never becoming sick, because it's all about algorithms, and our phones are going to make us, keep us healthy, and we're all going to turn 108 and still run marathons. What to do about that, specifically when young kids think they're going to turn 108 and still run marathons? And is it a valid question?
Yeah, maybe just to launch the debate, because it's a huge one. And I'm coming from the nuclear field. I've been working a few years, and in the defense domain, not in the civilian domains. And I remember the time when our French president decided to relaunch the test. And the reason was that we were moving to the simulation. So it was the beginning of the artificial intelligence. That's it. But to do so, and with a bomb, atomic bomb, you need to be sure that your simulation is the right one. So the idea that if you want to succeed, you need to accumulate a huge amount of data. So I think, to my point, especially with emerging infectious disease, there are lots of things we don't know. So the first things we shall try to initiate is to accumulate lots of data before, but that's maybe a little bit provocative. I would let my colleagues comment.
Because then we touch on privacy, or just because it opens a whole different can of worms?
The point you don't know really, you know the start point, you don't know the end point. So as long it could be used as a tool, a good tool for certain things, it could be also very bad for other things. So we don't really know. So it's like internet. It started and we're all happy, but it's also take directions that you could not see it at the time, that we are not very happy with them today. So, for example, one of the tools that I can see, one of the benefits, it's really to analyze mass data, a lot of data from all over the world, coming from different sectors, and really to make a good summary of it, or get all the information and really analyze it within seconds. So this could be a good outcome or good tool. On the other side, we take a risk because we don't know what will happen with this, and unfortunately, it's also not in our hands. It's already started, and we cannot have any control out of it.
But surely it must be really tempting, when facing the unknown, to press enter. yes. Felt like being dramatic.
No, you triggered me on the on the kids, you know, and their hope to get. Maybe it's not that unrealistic. The life expectancy has only been going up, and I think for you know. Children that are born now, I don't know the figures, but the life expectancy is not that low. It's certainly beyond 80 years, for sure. Also depending a bit where you live and where you grow up, etc., of course. But, and it comes down, you know, a bit to this question of balancing. I mean, there are infectious diseases, there's a pandemic threat, but then there are many other diseases, in particular non-communicable diseases that have a very high mortality and a high disease burden in our societies. Just to mention cancer, or you mentioned it before, obesity, diabetes. So it's an interesting question. Is artificial intelligence going to help? And there a key is really lifestyle, have a healthy lifestyle. You know, it's the way, what you eat, the way you eat, whether you move enough, whether you exercise, do not smoke, don't drink too much alcohol. I mean, we all know that. But we know how hard it is to live this lifestyle. Will artificial intelligence help? I don't know. Maybe for the younger generation, yes, to be told by the phone, you know, now it's time to get up and, you know, go out and go for a walk. Will it help for mental health issues? Maybe. It could well be that you can interact with your phone and that it can be helpful. But, I mean, if I wanted to be provocative, what I would say to a young person is probably put your phone down, you know, and go out for a walk. That will do more benefit, you know, than to keep scrolling your content on social media.
Well, good luck with that. Shall we end on a happy note? Let's talk about what it means to be human. I'm noticing that what we went through over the last few years has kind of brought us back to thinking about what really matters, what it means to be human, what it means to connect with one another. Do you agree that there's also this human side that's been highlighted by what we've been through? I was expecting an overwhelming yes. Oh.
I can try. I take it's personal from my personal experience. So on one side, yes. But on the other side, if you look the tendency and you look the young generations, so I think they are going in the direction that is more technology, more disconnected. They think social media is really socializing with others, but it's not. And I think we become more and more, in a way, lonely because we are communicating much more through social media, through internet, something in between us, the screen, but not we have this conversation we had this afternoon. It's rare. So I miss it. I want to see it more happening. Unfortunately, I see it's going to the wrong direction. And I see my younger daughters, how they're so exciting, and now they want to be on WhatsApp and want to communicate. When they're together with other friends, they want to be on the phone. For me, it's not a great evolution.
There's this beautiful book that was written, I think, last year. It's called Awe, written by Awe, as in bewilderment, by a professor at the University of New York. And he mentions that at the essence of being human consists in this moment of connection, of finding ourselves, of it is happening. Sometimes. Today it happened. Right.
I'm a natural optimist, so I would certainly like to believe that.
Yes, good.
It has to be said that there is also, on the other side, unfortunately, with, in part, disinformation, misinformation, an extraordinary polarization of opinions. True. And unfortunately, with that becomes a dehumanization, because you cannot be so critical and so opposed and still be empathetic, have empathy towards the person that you are criticizing so violently. And because this has been, perhaps inspired is too strong a word, but certainly reflected in the highest spheres of political action, I think people believe that this is acceptable. whereas in the past it wouldn't have been considered in any way acceptable in a well-functioning democracy to consider that your opponents were in some way to be dehumanized.
Absolutely. Katja, I'm seeing you nodding there. I'd like to know what you're thinking.
No, I mean, I think it is a mixed picture, no? I mean, on the one hand, we have, I think, seen a lot of acceptance for the measures that were imposed, right? But at the same time, you know, as Jonathan was saying, I mean, we have seen a huge amount of fake news or fake information circulating on the social media. We have maybe also seen that the trust in science has diminished, you know, which is, of course, an issue.
Yeah.
And these things need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed in a proper manner to make sure that the society is willing to cooperate, you know, with the next event hitting. Because that, for me, that's really my personal view, but I would not take it for granted that people are again willing, you know, to stay home and that they're willing to accept that schools are closed, etc., etc. Because we also start seeing now that there has been some damage done. I mean, we were talking about mental health issues in young people. So it will be very important that we have this robust evidence about what is really necessary and that we communicate that well so that we have an acceptance of public health measures in the event of a next crisis.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely exposed a vulnerability, I think, on a societal level. We are having different conversations because of it. I mean, this is a perfect example of it. I would like to thank you, each and every one of you, for your time, for your words, for your vision. Zeev, you have a presentation that you would like to share with us. Perhaps you can move to the chair.